Season 2 of The Lord of the Rings of Power, is now streaming on Prime Video, and I'm sorry it's taken me a few extra days to get to this video. I actually just watched the entire season. I have been catching up a bit when it comes to some stuff on TV, and so that's why this is a little bit late. But there are going to be some spoilers in this video as a result of that. There are some things that I want to talk about now that it's been a few days. At the end of the first season, it was revealed that Halbrand is in fact Sauron, walking amongst everyone and deceiving them into thinking he's an ally. But now that he has been revealed, he is proceeding with his next step in terms of conquering Middle-earth, which revolves around reclaiming the Orc army from Adar. And this is all in the middle of escalating tensions across dwarves, elves, and men across Middle-earth, who are all dealing with their own issues and the aftermaths of things that have happened in Season 1. And all of that might be leading to further catastrophe. And that's about the basic gist of the second season. That's what we're essentially dealing with here. Now that the pleasantries are out of the way after watching Season 1, now we can really get into some of the more, action heavy and even more tense situations that the characters are going to eventually face, and what eventually leads to the story that we know when it comes to The Lord of the Rings. I thought the first season was decent. I didn't love it. I didn't think it was the best thing that it could have been, but it was a solid enough start for the most part that I wanted to see what else they would do. I already made peace with the fact that they obviously didn't have the rights to certain things like the books, especially when it came to the Silmarillion. So they have to make, what they have to do to make the story happen. I'm totally fine with that. Obviously, that's not going to work with somebody who is very invested in the books, which I completely get as well. But I'm also interested in seeing what kind of spin someone else brings to that. What do you have to offer to the story and the overall legend when it comes to Middle-earth, and what you could do with that? And I thought Season 1 did some interesting things, even if they weren't done to the best potential that they could be. And there were a lot of issues, especially when it came to how the story played out. Season 2, on the other hand, takes a lot of those issues and makes sure that those are corrected. For one, it's a much tighter story than the other ones. There's a lot going on. Yes, there's definitely points of this where you can see it and go, there's a lot of story. But at no point did it feel like there was a lull in the storytelling. And it was always moving. And there is a consistent pace to this one, which I think the first season definitely lacked at times. This one is much quicker on its toes. And I feel like they've done a better job in terms of constructing this season. You don't really lose anything when it comes to the details that the story is providing. There are some subplots that I think could be expanded on a little bit more, but at the same time there are also aspects of them that are definitely being saved for later seasons, which are going to happen because this is a massive investment. If you remember, $1 billion went into the conception of this show. So I'm assuming that's like 5 seasons, because each one is about $200 million. Which, right out the gate, I will say, once again, the money is on the screen. This looks like a $200 million production. When the action gets going, and when you see certain sets and productions, and you see how things are being blown up, and the number of extras and the fight sequences, you can clearly see that they put a lot into making this feel as cinematic as possible. It almost baffles me that this is something that you can see on your phone, that it's coming out for something like that. I saw it on my TV, but at the same time, the idea that you could actually do that and it's this expensive a production boggles the mind, really. But that is not to say that it's any less effective. Everything looks phenomenal. Everything sounds phenomenal. Technically, this is a fantastic show, much like the first season. It also has, once again, a really great score from Bear McCreary, who does a great job of bringing these proceedings to life. He's an excellent composer. This is known. He's done a great job over the years with all sorts of projects. He once again continues to do a great job. And there's a bunch of really great performances also over here. There's a couple of standouts, though, that I really want to talk about. Those being Charlie Vickers as Sauron and Charles Edwards as Celebrimbor. This leads to my favorite dynamic of the entire season, and my favorite storyline as well, which is a good thing because most of the focus is on it, and that is with Celebrimbor making the Rings of Power. Once it has been revealed that the rings can in fact work, and they work for the elves in in restoring the Eldar and keeping them in Middle-earth, Sauron goes over to Celebrimbor like, hey, they worked great. We need to make some more rings. We need to try and restore peace to Middle-earth as much as we can. Not knowing that he is starting to being manipulated by Sauron, but he appears as an Annatar, a helper to Celebrimbor and someone who wants the best for him. So as you're seeing this great elven smith, probably the greatest to ever live in Middle-earth, create these rings and have a sense of joy around how much they can do, there's also a sense of sadness around it because he's very clearly being manipulated. And as the season goes on, things become worse and worse and his mind starts to wander. Meanwhile, Annatar is over there going, yeah, you're doing a great job, and sort of really making sure all of this plays out the way that he wants to, particularly when it comes to making the 9 rings for men. And essentially that will corrupt everything. It already starts to corrupt the dwarves because once those rings are made and they're sent over to Khazad-dûm, Durin, the king at the time, wears the ring, and at first it seems to be working. They're having some troubles when it comes to resources and light, and he manages to find a way to fix that. However, Prince Durin, who we've been following for the most part, and his wife Disa notice something's wrong. And so that storyline also plays out in a very affecting way. There is this sadness to how they're having to deal with everything happening in Khazad-dûm, especially when it comes to something that might be down there. You know what that is. Eventually when that thing comes out, I'll talk more about that in a second, but all of this is building to a crescendo. And I love the way the season manages to explore all that. But once we actually get to the conclusion of Celebrimbor's storyline, seeing that heartbreak as he realizes what he has done, and Eregion, which he presides over, has completely been run amok with orcs and burned down because Adar has brought the orc army over, is extremely tragic. And at the end of the day, it's just really sad to see. The whole time you're just thinking, well, at some point of time, this little guy is gonna be your downfall, which is incredibly funny to think about every now and then. Like, Sauron gets taken down by the last creature you'd expect, a hobbit. But we get there much, much later. As far as the other cast goes, I think Morfydd Clark, once again, as Galadriel, is really great. I really liked her in the first season. I think she's really great over here, too. She's handling a lot in the season, especially when it comes to knowing who Sauron is now, and the idea of how much he might have deceived her, and the other elves around her, particularly Elrond, Robert Aramayo, start to doubt her. It's like, do you know what you're doing? And do you understand that what you're doing with these rings could actually be a bad thing? And so there is constantly a lot of discourse between the two of them and everyone else in terms of what the next steps can be. And there are uneasy alliances being formed as a result of that, because there might be situations where the enemy of your enemy is your friend. And the way the show deals with that is very impressive. I also thought Adar did a great job, the actor playing him. I can't remember his name right now. He did a fantastic job as well. And there is a compassion to him just while he's leading the orcs, which results in the orcs themselves having compassion. That's something you see hints of every now and then, especially when it comes to the Peter Jackson trilogy. Not saying this is leading into that, but the way that is explored over here, I would say, is very, very interesting. And so there is this emotional aspect to them, which is how, he's seen as the father to the other Uruk. And so that particular sadness over the fact that you're all going to war, a lot of you might die. It's like, yeah, but do you seem like you're ready to die? And then that aspect of them starts to cloud them. I really like that aspect. I would say some subplots definitely get laid to the wayside, though. One of them in particular happens to be the one with the stranger and Nori, as they've been traveling around trying to find out who the stranger is. Eventually Poppy joins them as well, and you do get a conclusion to that arc. You do find out who the stranger is. 3, 2, 1, it's Gandalf. It's Gandalf. He is the Istar. Now you knew that. But that entire storyline for a while takes quite a sidelining. Like, there's a couple of episodes in the middle where you just don't even see any of those characters. There are, however, some great scenes as a result of this with Tom Bombadil, played by Rory Kinnear, who is really great over here, as Gandalf finds him, and eventually he leads Gandalf down this path of, finding out what his name is, and also finding his staff. And I did like that aspect of the story, eventually putting him in crosshairs with the Dark Wizard, who is someone we don't really know much about. I know it's not Saruman, I know that for sure, it's not him, but I did like that storyline. I wish there was a little bit more with it though. We don't get a lot of time with that. There's also some stuff when it comes to, other subsections of Harfoots, which I would have liked to have known a little bit more of. We get a lot of exposition about it. But there are some fascinating storylines over there that would have been more interesting. The storylines that are going on, especially with the Numenor as well, I thought could have had a little bit more. You do get some more moments with them than I would say with Gandalf and the Harfoots, but at the same time, some of the stuff that's going on over there, especially politically, it's very interesting, and you're sort of seeing how Numenor eventually crumbles apart, which it will. As you know the stories, that's going to eventually go down. And you're seeing the seeds of that planted. I just wish there was a little bit more focus when it came to some of these subplots. And there's an even smaller subplot handling when it comes to Isildur, who of course is alive. And he is eventually working with Arondir to find these wild men who are going around and essentially, stop them from hurting anyone else in the village. And they eventually end up encountering the Ents. I like this entire aspect of it, but again, it's pretty short. You don't get a ton going on over there. But I also understand that this is stuff that they're also going to continue in the next season, so there is that aspect to it too. Just saying that if you're going to watch this entire season as its whole story, there are some places where it could have had a little bit more expansion. And I would say that is my one issue with it. I would also say some of the dialogue is not always perfect. There's some very clunky lines from characters every now and then. There's some really good ones too. But every now and then you just hear a couple of dialogue lines and go, why is that in there? Whatever. But I was going to go back quickly to Khazad-dûm because eventually when King Durin does not, relent, and he starts to even hurt other dwarves in keeping the ring on. Eventually, he keeps digging and digging and digging and digging, and it leads to the emergence of the Balrog. And it's a quick moment that you see the Balrog right now, but the way that entire scene is executed is brilliant. It's also incredibly heartbreaking as you see Durin sacrifice himself to basically keep the Balrog at bay. And yeah, it's a terrifying moment, but it's also beautifully handled. And now that his son is going to be taking charge, there's a lot more work to do, so I'm very curious to see how they'll pull that off. At the end of the day, I found myself very impressed with Rings of Power Season 2 overall. I think it's a much better season than the first one. I think there are improvements made over here. It's still not completely flawless. There are still steps to be taken to get it to that point. But I do enjoy it a lot more, and I hope it continues that upward curve. I'm not going to do a play-by-play of the entire season. There's so much to talk about. But overall, I did enjoy it a bit more than the first season. And whereas I gave the first one like a B plus or something, this one I would actually give a lot higher. I actually enjoyed quite a bit of it. And I'm going to give Rings of Power Season 2 an A-. I actually really like this. I'm not even kidding. I thought it was really good. I don't know what the conversation around it has been, but I saw most of the reviews seem to be positive, so I'm guessing it's a lot better. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very, very soon. There's a lot coming this week. A lot of things that are, being caught up with. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.